Hello, and welcome to another week, another episode of the House of St. Rainey podcast. Very excited about this week's episode. I'm going to be talking about living your optimal life path. What that means, what that looks like, how to discover your highest purpose, and all that good stuff. Before we get into it, I just want to do a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is my book, Finding God, Losing God, Becoming God. I am an independent author dedicated to sharing the truth of unconditional love through unity consciousness with as many people as possible. And this book is one of the tools that I've created to help do that. So if you haven't read it, make sure to grab a copy. It really helps support my mission and also my family. And if you have purchased it, thank you so much. I really deeply appreciate it. And I hope that it has positively served you. Okay, so optimal life path. What is it? How do you live it? Let's talk about it. The way that I see the human incarnation unfolding and what we're here to do, I think, you could just say that you're just here to live this life. Just be. Enjoy your relationships and learn and grow and all these things. You could just leave it at that. But if we want to get a little bit more specific, like what are you here to do? I think it's twofold. On one hand, it's spiritual maturity. So it's really interacting with all these emotions and feelings and really feeling them, processing them, integrating lessons into your journey so that you are literally raising your level of consciousness. That's like your soul's journey. So one of the reasons that you're here having this human experience is spiritual maturity. And so that's something to kind of just always be mindful of. If you're intentionally on this spiritual journey, which if you're listening and watching, you almost certainly are. So that's one core aspect of why you're here is to learn and to grow and to spiritually mature. So let's set that aside. That is extremely important, but that's not really what we're talking about on this week's episode. What we're talking in this week's episode is really discovering your highest purpose. You could call this like your calling. What are you here to do vocationally for your work? Now, I believe the most succinct way to understand what you're here to do, your calling, is like God's will for your life, you could call it that. Most succinctly is to serve others by following your bliss. And so now we unravel what that means for you in your life. What are your gifts, passions, and abilities? Let's just start there. What's your gifts, passions, and abilities? This is, you could see this as your bliss. What do you love to do? And this could be, it doesn't need to be doing what I'm doing, obviously. I'm following my bliss because I love to write and I love to teach, but you might love to do ceramics. You might be a numbers person. Maybe you love crunching numbers. You love equations. You could be a woodworker. You could be anything. Whatever lights you up. What lights you up? What do you love to spend your time doing? What gets you into flow state? I know for me, again, when I'm writing, I'm in flow. Time just kind of fades. All other external preoccupations fade. When I'm in the zone writing, it's hard to get me out. What's that for you? It might be something artistic and creative. It might be something a little bit more. Some people are more analytical. Some people are more numbers oriented. And maybe you like, whatever you like doing. What is that for you? Pinpoint that. These are your passions. This is your bliss. Follow that. You have that for a reason. What are you gifted at? What are you good at doing? And that could be it might be closely associated with your bliss. It might not be, or maybe you can marry the two in some way. But really reflect on what are your gifts? What are you inherently gifted at? So maybe consider what are your strengths? This is really important to identify your strengths and weaknesses. For me, I'm a words person. I always have been. Like my love language, if you look at the 5 love languages, mine is far and away words of affirmation. Words are super important to me. It's literally how I feel loved, and it's how I express love. Like words are super important to me. I have learned throughout my life that I really enjoy teaching. You know, I spent 6 years as a teaching pastor, as a Protestant Christian. And in that season, I felt I was in my sweet spot. I could teach, I could encourage people, and it felt aligned. Now, it was aligned at that time with that specific belief set, but now I've just taken that with a new expanded belief set. I'm not on stage in front of hundreds of people or anything like that. I'm in front of a camera. I'm in front of a microphone. But teaching spiritual truths, it feels comfortable to me. It's what I love to do. And as a pastor, I felt very encouraged that I was in my sweet spot. So what is that for you? What are your strengths? What are you inherently good at? What's kind of coded into your personality that you can, let's funnel, we're funneling all of this into your calling. What are your abilities? What are you able to do? There might be some limitations. There might be physical limitations. Let's not focus on the limitations, of course, but what are your abilities? What can you do? What are you able to do? You know, and this kind of speaks to, I don't want to get too far ahead here, but when you're discovering your calling, you might think, oh, I would love to do that, but I can't because I have this job to do. I don't have time to pursue that because I have bills to pay, and this is how I pay bills. So I can't just stop doing it. So now really reflect on, what are you able to do? What are your gifts? What are your strengths? What are your passions? What are your abilities? What are you literally capable of doing? And what are you able to do in the present moment? So again, let me just give you a brief snapshot of myself. When I started writing this book, I wasn't a full-time author at that time. It was a passion project for me. I was filming and editing for my wife's art education business. But I knew that I was not in my sweet spot. I knew that something needed to change. And so I started writing on nights and weekends. You know, after a full day of work and with family, when my son went to bed, I would come in here and I would write. It was a passion project, nights and weekends, until it became something. It really started to become something. And then finally, it's just taking the next logical steps. What am I able to do? Well, at that time, I was able to write nights and weekends. I wasn't able to just quit my filming and editing with my wife's business. We needed to continue doing that. What was I able to do at that time? Aligning my gifts, passions, abilities, I would write on nights and weekends. Now that might sound exhausting, but here's the key. When you're following your bliss, you really enjoy doing what you're doing. So for me, I could come into this studio and write my book at 9 at night after a long day of work and just life. What gives me an edge is I love to write. And so when I come in here to write, it fills my cup. It doesn't drain my energy, it fills my cup. So you take the next logical steps. What are you able to do? And then it got to a point where it really became something. It was really taking shape into like a legit book. And in my mind, I started to really consider, hey, I think I would really like to be a full-time author. And it got to a point when, in discussing with my wife what I was able to do, we hired a video editor, and I was able to spend the majority of my work time writing. So what are you able to do in the present moment? Take your next logical steps towards getting there. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but we're discovering the calling for your life. What are your gifts, passions, abilities? What are you capable of? What can you do in the present moment as the next logical step, working towards serving others by following your bliss, your calling, God's plan? So really pinpoint what that is for you in your life, and then consider, how can I serve others by doing this? Let's talk about service to others. Service probably sounds to a lot of people like volunteering your time at like a food bank or something, or like washing people's feet. That kind of service. Handing out blankets to homeless people or something like that. Those are all wonderful, beautiful things that it would be awesome if we all participated in uplifting humanity in this way. But that's not necessarily what I mean when I say to serve others. What I mean is taking your bliss and serving others, like marrying those two things. Now that might be an education piece. For me, it's more of an education, encouragement, inspiration kind of thing. But for other people, it might be more of entertainment. So maybe you love to make people laugh. Like, how can you make people laugh with your present moment circumstance? Maybe you're an entertainer. Okay, let's take that for example. Let's say that following your bliss is entertaining people, making people laugh, but you have a full-time job at a bank or something, or you work at a restaurant, or do whatever you do. And maybe you want to remove yourself from that workplace so that you can entertain people full-time. What can you do in the present moment that entertains people? Well, I can give you some ideas. I mean, you could start to really produce online content. Now, again, if this is your bliss and this is aligns with your gifts, passions, abilities, and your strengths, then you're probably a pretty entertaining person. And so in your nights and weekends, your off time, you can choose to put your energy into creating content that entertains people, that makes people laugh. If that's the route that you want to go, you could commit to, I want to produce a video every single day for an entire year to post on the internet. What a wonderful tool the internet can be for people to follow their bliss and to serve others. So maybe the entertainer says, I want to produce content every single day that encourages people, that entertains people, that makes people laugh. While I'm still working at the restaurant or the bank or wherever you at the retail place or wherever. And you slowly, you keep on posting, you keep on creating, you learn as you go, and some of your videos perform horribly and some of your videos perform really well, and one of them pops off and you get tons of followers. And it's snowball effect, and by the end of the year, you have a following. And you get closer and closer and closer to making that your profession, your vocation, your new vocation. Maybe you don't want to do the digital route. Maybe you want to be a live performer. Okay, that's great. That's wonderful. And you can serve people in that way. And so on your days off, you put together a comedy set or some sort of routine to share on stage live with people to entertain them. This is if you really want to pursue your calling, if you want to really follow your bliss as your vocation to serve others. You might be perfectly content working at the retail place or the restaurant. I'm not trying to say that you all need to quit your jobs and whatever. You could also entertain your friends and family. You can entertain your local community in some way. So I'm just kind of giving different roads for you to take. But if you feel like your bliss is entertaining people and you're not doing that, you're going to get really drained. I mean, like, following your bliss is filling up your cup. It's just what you're here to do. I do believe that we all have these gifts, passions, and abilities. I do believe that we all have this bliss that we can follow. And when we follow our bliss, like, that just tells you like you're on the right path. It's what you're meant to do. It's something that fills your cup up. But when you're not doing something that fills your cup, that feels just so fun and has meaning and purpose behind it, like serving others. When you're not doing anything that fills your cup or has purpose, life can be pretty drab. Especially if you're working a job that you don't like and you're not fulfilling that creativity, like outflow from within, life can be pretty drab. So I highly recommend like following your bliss, do what you love to do. And if you want to really pursue it as your calling, take the next logical step. That's another thing that I want to share too, is taking the next logical step. Let's say you're on this path and you want to pursue your calling and have that be your full-time vocation, serving others by following your bliss. But you're working a job that you don't presently like. Let's say that that's your scenario. You take the next logical step. So and the next logical step, it could be incremental. You might do a hard stop. You might say, I'm quitting my job tomorrow and I'm pursuing this thing. That's your free will. You can do that. But really, I would encourage taking the next logical step. So if doing that, if a hard stop brings a lot of suffering into your life, that might not be the next logical step. Oftentimes it's just a natural progression of taking the next step. So maybe it's taking baby steps so that you're not just introducing a lot of suffering into your life for no reason. In terms of like, I'm going to quit my job and become a full-time influencer. I have 0 followers and I have bills to pay. You know what I'm saying? Like really think about the next logical step. For me, it was writing nights and weekends. And then once we felt ready for us to hire a video editor, I could do that. And now I'm putting all of my time and energy into my calling. But it was incremental. It's what can you do right now? What's the next logical step? There's another thing that I write about in my book that I think will be really insightful here, is to consider the amount of hours you are able to put into your calling. How many hours are you able to put into serving others by following your bliss? As I was writing this book, I did a little bit of research, and getting your master's typically takes somewhere between 1,800 and 3,600 hours. And when you get a master's degree, what you're doing is you are acquiring knowledge and skill in a very niche area, in a very specified area that most other people don't have. If you have a master's degree in, art history, you know more about art history, generally speaking, than most other people, right? Because you've put in 1,800 or 3,600 hours into art history. So now you have developed knowledge and skill that is more advanced than generally most people. How many hours can you put into your calling, into serving others by following your bliss? For me, in the beginning of writing nights and weekends, it wasn't a lot, but I kept doing it because I loved doing it. And then at the beginning of 2024, when we hired the editor, then I was able to write almost the entire year. I was able to write this book in basically 2024, full-time writing. I was able to produce this book. I estimate that the amount of time I put into writing that book in 2024 was about 2,500 hours. It was close to 2,500 hours. That's a full work day. And then I put time at night into visualizing and contemplating. That all goes into this book as well. And so in that year, I estimate I put in about 2,500 hours. Now, if you compare that with how long it takes to get a master's degree, okay, so now we're like putting a tremendous amount of hours into producing something that is aligned with your highest purpose, with your calling. And now in 2025, I'm putting a tremendous amount of hours into promoting the principles and things from this book to really get this highest purpose, this calling fulfilled. As I was writing it, I was fulfilling the highest purpose and calling. But now as I promote it, now I'm encouraging people towards unconditional love, the unity consciousness. So just think about what you can do with the amount of hours that you have. And if you are able to put in a significant amount of time, or maybe you incrementally work your way towards being able to put in a significant amount of time towards a single goal, focusing your attention on a single goal. So for me, it's not just completing this one book. The single goal for me is that purpose of encouraging people towards unconditional love. So writing the book, it funnels into that one goal. Doing this podcast funnels into the same goal. I'm channeling all of these hours into one goal. So how many hours can you put into a single goal? You might want to consider, what is your overall highest purpose? It might be entertaining people. It might be any number of things. Really define that goal, really define that highest purpose, and funnel your hours into it. And the more hours that you're able to funnel into this one single goal, your highest purpose, which is serving others by following your bliss, the more that you become equipped, you become able, you become a leader, you become an influencer, you become a teacher, etc. Because again, the person that studied art history and has the masters, they have put in the hours to become somewhat of an authority in art history. When you're able to channel all of your energy into your single goal, whatever that is, then you become an influencer, an authority, a leader, or whatever in your niche, in your field, in whatever you feel called to do. So really understand your bliss, gifts, passions, abilities, and your strengths. Really articulate your highest purpose. I didn't really talk about that much, but again, really articulating your purpose is going to be really helpful into funneling all of your energy into this one goal. So my purpose, through contemplation and honestly, I'll talk about this in later episodes too, honestly through like astrology and numerology, I've been really confirming. I'll talk about that later. I've been able to, through these means, I've been able to articulate my highest purpose as encouraging people towards unconditional love through unity consciousness. So really articulate your highest purpose. What do you feel like you are here to do? And how can you channel your gifts, passions, and abilities into that? And the way to do this is to serve others. How can you serve others? By following your bliss. So really spend some time in contemplation, maybe get your journal out and write if that's helpful for you. Really think through, what do I love to do? What am I good at doing? What do I feel like, or how do I feel like I can serve others by doing what I love to do? And once you really articulate and dial in that highest purpose and what you can do to fulfill that highest purpose, what's your next logical step? Take your next logical step and keep taking your next logical steps. When you are in your bliss, you feel your energy. You're not being drained. You're filling your energy because you're doing what you love to do. This is like the sweet spot. This is like what you're here to do. This is your calling. And that doesn't mean that you impact millions of people. It might be impacting your local community. It might be impacting just your family. And that's a beautiful thing. You know, your calling might be to be a world leader. Or your calling might be to be an awesome parent to a future world leader. And those are just as important. So it's service. It's not about impacting the entire globe. It's just about following your feelings. It's about following like what you feel like you're here to do. What's your sweet spot? How can I serve others? And serving others might be digitally, it might be in person, it might be the world, it might be your local community, it might be being a teacher to a classroom of 20 kids, it might be to your own family. But you'll know it when you feel aligned, you'll know it when you're not aligned. Just follow those feelings. I hope that this podcast episode was helpful for you in discovering your highest purpose of serving others by following your bliss. And I hope that you're able to take those next logical steps so that you can really fill up your own cup and serve others. What a powerful combination that is. Enjoy what you do and have it positively impact others. That's the optimal way to live. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope that this got things stirring in your minds for you to brainstorm, what do I love to do? How can I serve others? If it was helpful for you, I would greatly appreciate a follow, subscribe, 5-star review, whatever, anything like that helps me. You're helping me serve others by encouraging others towards unconditional love when you do that. So I greatly appreciate you. Peace and blessings. I will see you next week on the House of Saint Rainey.